taxpayers' money is really being used to pay for.
If the government gave 200 million to opposition groups, and only 14 or 40, I didn't quite catch which it was for political support, what on earth was the rest for?
The 14 million is specifically in terms of political support. Other examples, for example, 39 million has been spent on roads. I will, of course, not write to the noble lord in terms of specific breakdown, but it's very much about assisting the coalition, the Syrian opposition, to actually stand on its feet.
Why does Her Majesty's government not recognise that Assad is not going anywhere? Doesn't my noble friend really think that British taxpayers want £14 million spent on supporting so-called opposition? Surely that'd be better spent on fuel poverty.
Will Her Majesty's government change their priorities from providing that massive financial support to opposition groups which are not moderate and make every effort to achieve the lifting of sanctions?
Well, Baroness Caroline Cox raised the issue of the UK's spending in Syria in the British Parliament, calling for greater transparency. She actually travelled to Syria herself to get a better understanding of the conflict there, but she says the British government not too keen on getting that side of her story.
We got some amazing figures, something like 200 million a year, and the government said it's going to moderate opposition. But our concern is that there really is not believed to be any moderate opposition at all, so we're very concerned it's actually going to Islamist-related groups, and that it may be prolonging the war. I'll be putting down more questions to ask the government to give more explicit and detailed information, precisely how much is going, where it's going, and I would rather the British government was doing more to take forward positive proposals to help the Syrian people, and particularly the lifting of sanctions. I got a lot of aggression after a visit to Syria. We did meet President Assad. I do not in any way condone some of the very serious things he has done, but I went to listen to the Syrian people. The British government was not pleased with me because they tried to prevent me from going. They tried to tell me how dangerous it was. Well, I spent a lot of my life working with people who are suffering from war and depression and persecution. I used my role in the House of Lords to try to be a voice for those whose voices are not heard.
A top EU human rights official also found himself in the line of fire after visiting Syria and was forced to resign in the wake of the trip. Earlier this year, Pedro Agramunt joined Russian lawmakers during a visit to Damascus, where he met with President Bashar al-Assad. EU officials, however, took issue with the rendezvous. He's since quit Europe's main human rights watchdog, though he says he doesn't regret taking the trip at all.
I saw a lot over a short period of time. I only spent 24 hours there, but I noticed a strong Russian influence on the country. I saw that Russia is very serious about fighting international terrorism and ISIL. Other countries, including Turkey and those in the US-led international coalition, are also making considerable efforts to put an end to what's causing the majority of Europe's problems: terrorism, the influx of refugees and migration, most of which are rooted in Syria. Seeing that, I realised that much closer cooperation between the countries combating terrorism is needed. As I've said before, some parliaments would prefer to return to the Cold War, but times have changed. I've always considered Russia to be a European country, and that Europe is inconceivable without Russia, and vice versa. Although some didn't like it, I did what I wanted, and if I had a chance to go back in time, I would have done everything just the same.
And you would have even travelled to Syria?
Of course.
The US State Department says the al-Nusra terrorist group, now known as Tahrir al-Sham, uses chemical weapons in Syria. Russia's defense ministry has reacted to the statement, saying it's the first admission of its sort after years of allegations that only the Assad government carries out chemical attacks in Syria.
Tactics of ISIS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and other violent extremist groups include the use of suicide bombers, kidnapping, small and heavy arms, improvised explosive devices, and chemical weapons. They have targeted major city centres in Damascus, Aleppo, Hama, Dara, Homs, Idlib, and Deir ez-Zor provinces.
Let's get some more details on this now.